So yeah, I'm just going to be talking about the parachute equipment considerations for wingsuiting by yours truly. I should jack that onto the screen so it's full screen. Okay, so everyone can hear me now. We're all good. Thumbs up. Yep, sweet. Awesome. Let's get amongst this. So I'll quickly run through this. I'm just going to be talking about your main canopy, reserve canopy, rig choice, deployment bag, bridle, pilot chute, AAD, Rsl Sky Hook, your helmet, your audible, visuals, wingsuit, and then we'll save some questions for later. Okay, so let's get amongst this. So this seems to be one of the biggest questions that I get asked about all the time, and it's your main canopy. Everyone's like, what canopy do I need? What should I be looking for when I get into wingsuiting? So first off, if you are a keen wingsuiter and you've done your first flight courses and you're looking to transition into mainly doing wingsuit flights, I would highly suggest that you get a wingsuit canopy specified for wingsuit flight. All the manufacturers do them these days. So Squirrel, who I'm sponsored by, do an Epstein Pro. Aerodyne do a Pilot 7. Icarus do the Kraken. PD do a Horizon. Now, it's the reason these are wingsuit specific is they're very docile canopies, so they're very forgiving on the openings. So the last thing you really want to be thinking about when you're wingsuiting and you're halfway through your wingsuit skydives with your mates, the last thing you want to think about is having to frantically think, oh, I hope this deployment's going to go well. I hope I don't have a chop. And these canopies are designed specifically for that. So generally speaking, they'll be almost like a high performance reserve canopy. So they're very low bulk, which makes them very significantly smaller than a normal canopy would be, than your standard ZP parachute, which means, and this is the best thing about it, you should be able to squeeze a size larger than you normally would. So say you're flying a 150, this would actually be able to fit like a 170 low bulk canopy. And that's sort of really what we're after. And another thing is wing loading, guys. This is super important. Most of the manufacturers actually have a wing loading range of 1.2 to 1. So it's pretty low considering, you know, a lot of us are at 1.5 and above. And realistically speaking, wingsuit skydives are technical enough. We've got enough going on that we don't need to be flying these high performance canopies. We really just need something that's going to open, that's just going to be buttery smooth. And you're going to look up and go, yes, instead of a katana, which would be like spinning you up, I guess. So these are things to really think about. We're not after big swooping canopies. And even the experts, guys, they generally fly 150s as their lowest. So I'm a little bit of an exception to that. I fly a slightly smaller canopy, but I'm a lot lighter than the other guys. So again, so that's for the more experienced guys. The people looking to do a first flight course, generally speaking, if you have a docile main that's non-elliptical, we're after a 7-cell. Low bulk is preferable, so that's your F111s. Just because it's not going to have a snappy opening. It is going to fall through a bit because it's the porosity is just not there like a ZP. It's not zero. You are just going to float into it. And another thing to think about is again, these wing loadings, they're recommended 1.3 unless the canopy is over 170 square feet. This being so because the 170s, 170 above, you're generally going to have less issues of the canopy spinning up and all that sort of stuff. And of course, have your lines in trim. This is a big thing. So a lot of your smaller canopies, you probably don't realize that when you're actually deploying with these smaller canopies, they actually have a smaller line set. So they possibly won't clear the burble of your wingsuit. And that's why we go for the 150 and above is our general rule, because the 117s and the 109s and all that sort of stuff, generally speaking, it'll suck the canopy back onto your back, and you're going to have a pretty fun dance in the sky afterwards, I'll tell you that. So again, safety when we're thinking about mains. Now your reserve canopies. Now this one's going to be pretty simple. know your reserve in case you have to fly it. So I did a course not long ago, and I asked everyone what reserve they had in their rig, and someone had no idea. And they had no idea they were downsizing too, which is super scary. So know what reserve you have in case you have to fly it. It's a pretty simple rule. The reserve should be loaded no higher than your main canopy. So again, if you're using your reserve canopy, the last thing you want to have to do is downsize, because you don't know where you're going to land. Wingsuiting, we're famous for landing off. We could be like, I don't know, years ago, they used to call us the Toogoolawah Hiking Club because we used to land off a fair bit. So again, we really want to think about not downsizing when we're going to our reserve canopy. So again, our wing loading for our reserve canopy, 1-to-1, provides a really, it's just a safe margin for landing in case of injury or unconsciousness. So again, with wingsuiting, we do have a lot of movement in the sky, and there have been a lot of collisions. I've been involved in collisions. Everyone I know has been involved with collisions, but generally speaking, they're very, not a lot of them end badly or poorly. But the last thing you want to do is, say someone crashes into you and you break an arm. The last thing you want to do is be worrying about downsizing your reserve canopy and having to fly that in who knows where. In a backyard, there could be stables, there could be houses, there could be power lines. So again, just be super conservative is what I'm trying to get at here. And my rule, and I've stuck to this since I started wingsuiting, is I get the biggest reserve that'll fit in my container, flat out. So my reserve is a 135, and I fly a 137. So that is a slight downsize, but again, I'm very, very experienced. So what I would suggest is, again, no lower than your main canopy for a reserve. Again, just common sense. So this is an interesting one. There are actually wingsuit specific rigs and mods you can get for wingsuiting. So there's one called the long rig for easier deployments. It has a more natural deployment position for the wingsuiting. So a couple of these are the Aerodyne L series, UPT-1 series, and Javelin has an actual rig that is wingsuit specific only. So the Aerodyne L series and UPT-1 series, you can do normal skydives. So you can do your wingsuit skydives, and you can also do your free fly jumps and all that sort of stuff as well. I'll actually flip over and show you the differences for a quick second. So to the left, on the left top corner, you can probably see a short stubby rig. This is just your general normal rig that you can get. And to the right of that is the Aerodyne L. So again, it's longer, it's actually narrower, and it's a lot thinner. So this helps not only with our deployment sequences, but it also provides a lot better sort of aerodynamics as well. And that's kind of important when you get to the top end of things with skydiving. And again, to the right of that is the Micron version. And again, you can just see it looks super long. And the reason being is when we're going to deploy, we don't want to have to be reaching up and bending our wings, because some of our race suits, some of our more advanced suits have a very stiff leading edge. And if we can just reach back and grab our BOC and pull without having to bend our arms, that's going to increase our performance for deployments. It's going to make everything a lot more predictable. We're going to be able to fly our deployments a lot better without having to bend down and reach. So it's basically, there's no downside to having the longer rig. And in fact, I know the free flyers are actually going for these longer rigs these days as well. And again, right down the bottom, sorry, that's the Aurora. So that's a wingsuit specific rig that is only for wingsuiting. You cannot use that for anything else. It mimics a base rig. So the whole back of this container here, it actually all opens out completely flat, and you can actually pack your parachute in that without a D bag, and you can use a D bag that's supplied. That's completely up to you. So we'll skip back up to where I was, and again talk about those dynamic corners that I just vaguely just mentioned then in the packing tray. So basically with wingsuit deployments, when we are flying along, generally speaking, containers are developed with a vertical deployment in mind. So when you're deploying your parachute, generally they come straight up. With wingsuits skydiving, it's a lot different because we have a lot more forward speed, and the parachutes and the D bag and everything's actually getting extracted out of the rear. And what we found is the bag kept nudging on the corners of the rig, the D bag, and it kept spinning up. And as soon as it spun up to one side, it would catch out of the burble. It would go into the dynamic wind down the back, and it would start to create the D bag spinning. So before you knew it, you just deployed, and all of a sudden you've got line twists out of nowhere, crazy line twists. So the manufacturers decided to do this to the rigs. So bottom left-hand corner, you can see that the bottom of the tray lays completely flat. And so that allows the D bag to escape out the back without any interference of the rig itself. So generally speaking, that's what the wingsuit mod is. And you can actually, some of the manufacturers actually allow certain riggers, if you don't have them and you are going to wingsuit, sometimes they allow riggers, qualified riggers, to modify containers to actually do this for you. But again, yeah, contact your manufacturer about that if you're thinking about doing that. And obviously make sure your rigger has been certified by that manufacturer as a registered repairer. And again, top right-hand side, that's the Micron version. And again, that's your dynamic corners. So the rig and the D bag just comes straight out the rear. So it's, man, the first time I actually flew with the dynamic corners, man, it improved everything so much. It was actually crazy. So actually I can actually skip over to this page here. For a second. And I can go to, oh, these are actually some of those, these are some of those canopies. So the Epicene Pro, again, if any wingsuit skydiver is serious about getting into wingsuiting full time and wants a recommended canopy, the Epicene Pro is the go-to. It has the best opening performance of any wingsuit canopy, hands down. I will sign my life away. I'll put money on it. You were not going to get a safer canopy than the Epicene Pro. That's for sure. Just going to move this bar out of the way. So again, I'm going to just show you a video here of a deployment. I'm not sure. Can you see this? Perhaps, maybe not.
We can.
So if we have a look at that again, we can see that everything gets extracted relatively towards the rear of that skydiver, and it's not actually out the top. So
hey, look, it's Melissa. I've got a view of a guy in a wind tunnel, not the deployment video.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Have I gone wrong?
Oh, okay. It's sharing this screen. Well, we can actually show that one anyway. So this is actual, this is a sequence basically showing the testing of different pilot chutes and bridle lengths, and doing weak throws and doing strong throws. Sorry, the video that I was showing before was an actual deployment, but this shows it as well. When we're actually deploying and pulling our pilot chutes, everything doesn't go 90 degrees up towards the sky. it relatively comes out the rear, straight out the back there. And this is why we're getting the dynamic corners. And this is why I'll discuss later why we have these lengths pilot chutes. So you see it there, just stutter a bit with a weak throw. And again, this is showing correct technique with both arms reaching back and going into that deployment. So this was done over a fair few weeks, and they were trying different wingsuit designs, different pilot chute designs. And I'd hate to think it went into the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get this sort of research done so they can produce the gear that they do. So I'll go back to the, I'll go back to this sheet, sorry. So again, this goes into the whole deployment section, which is, so deployments are a massive, massive issue with wingsuits. Most of our chops, well, all of our chops are generally because of bad deployments. And every step that we take and everything I'm going to talk about today is why we select different gear and why the gear is the way it is. So the deployment bag, the semi-stowless encourages smooth deployments. And reason being, normal D-bags have a rubber bands, and basically it gives too much resistance when it's going back past your back, past the burble. Oh, man. I don't know what's going on there. Deployment bags, here we go. So I'm just going to leave this here for now. So the rubber bands, again, basically the D-bag swaps side to side, and because it's still in our burble before it gets out the back and starts deploying, it can actually twist around. And it gives, again, the rubber bands give us asymmetric deployments leading to line twists. So if you do have a standard D-bag, I do recommend the stowless because it gives a clean deployment until that last few rubber bands. So everything's already out the back, out of the burble while it's deploying. But if you're using a standard D-bag with your rubber bands, just leave 18 inches of line unstowed carefully, sort of S-folded in the bottom of the packing tray. So this will basically just allow it to come out of that burble before hitting its sort of first resistance. So it gives it a little bit of a head start, a little bit of a jerk, instead of instantly going into that, the swapping around of the rubber bands. And so this is the inside of the semi-stowless bag. And you can tell, you can see it's giving us a head start, basically before it gives in to these rubber bands. And generally speaking, once it does that, you don't get too many issues off the D-bag. But again, you can S-fold it just like it is here in the tray if you do have a full normal D-bag that isn't stowless.
Is that once it's in the BOC?
Sorry, once it's in the BOC.
Yeah, is that what you're trying to say?
I'm just saying that, yeah, when you're stowing, no, it's sort of before you put your D-bag into your rig, just S-fold a little bit of your main lines and place your D-bag over the top. So it kind of looks like this picture here, but you're placing that, your rig over the top, your D-bag over the top. I should have got a photo. Sorry about that. But yeah, basically how this D-bag's sitting here with those S-folds, that's what it would look like on the bottom of your tray in your rig.
Yep. Yeah, sick.
Yeah, so it sort of gives you that much, like the 18 inches, just a bit of a head start before it hits those rubber bands. Because sometimes, because of the burble, we've had instances where the D-bags just hasn't had enough pressure to release on the bands, and it's slapping the guy on the back of the legs. So we really want, that's when you get to the sort of bigger end of the wingsuits, because the burble gets a lot larger, and it's not uncommon for people to kick their D-bag. Play a bit of D-bag soccer, and And again, this just comes down to experience, you know, like if you're deploying too fast, you probably will kick your D bag. You really want to, a lot of people think that when they're going to deploy that they should flare too much to reduce too much speed. But what that does is it increases the burble and you're throwing, it's almost like a hop and pop and you're throwing out the door, but you've got this massive burble of a wingsuit. It's just too unpredictable. With the wingsuit flare, we want to flare enough that when you extract the pilot chute, that the D-bag is going to have enough force to pull the rubber bands and pull the line out of the rubber bands itself. And this again goes into that 8 to 9 foot bridle measured from the pin to the PC. So again, in the smaller wingsuits, this isn't really an issue, but as soon as you start to get into the mid-size wingsuits, this becomes very important. A lot of people say that the bigger the better, but that just isn't the case. 8 to 9 foot bridle from pin to PC, that's fine. That's enough. I've heard of 12 foot bridles. There's no real need for it. But yeah, I think what we're really just trying to do is clear it out the back of the tail without putting too much bridle on it. Less is more in some cases. And we really want to minimize the risk of getting our bridle entanglement. And this is something I'll talk about a bit later, but when we get to pilot chutes. But a common thing for wingsuiting used to be bridle entanglements and bridle knots and stuff like this. So bridle, again, like the bridles shorter than 7 feet, increase the risk of the pilot chute being affected by the wake turbulence. And everyone's heard of the old PC in tow. I've personally had a few and had to manually extract the pin and throw the D-bag out myself. And that was just because I was running a smaller bridle, but in a big suit. So I still had a lot of time when we're flying to be able to just reach back, extract the pin, throw the bag out. But I don't recommend that. Don't try it. Just go to your EPs if anything bad happens. But again, your 8 to 9 foot bridle will solve most of those problems. And so this is, not a lot of people know that there are wingsuit specific pilot chutes. This is one of them here from Squirrel Wingsuits. So you'll notice that it's not just round, it's got this vent in the top, just like the base jumping sort of pilot chutes. And it's actually shaped like a donut. It's not round. If you can sort of just imagine it, if you can see how it concaves in that center, this increases the snatch force considerably. And that's what they were testing in that wind tunnel earlier. So again, the minimum pilot chute size for wingsuiting is 26 inches. So 28 to 30 is recommended. But when we're getting to the larger wingsuits, because we have to slow them down so much, I recommend getting the 30-inch. Because if you happen to slow down too much and you deploy your pilot chute and it may not have enough strength to extract your pin and your D-bag. And this was a bit of an issue early on, but luckily guys like the Squirrel guys and riggers and base jumpers sort of helped it along and started putting those 30 inches on, which is super awesome. So things to think about: condition and design. Not just the size is important for the deployments. So you'll notice because this pilot chute has a vent in it, it doesn't oscillate as much as a normal pilot chute. And because it's got that sort of donut shape about it, once it deploys, it pulls straight back and stays in place and doesn't oscillate, which again used to cause a lot of line twists. So I can't recommend these pilot chutes enough. The Sky Snatch from Squirrel, definitely something to invest in if you do a lot of wingsuiting. Again, the PC should be constructed of ZP, zero porosity materials, and in excellent condition. not worn out. So the amount of times that I've been basically, I wingsuit a lot, and this is super important. It makes a massive difference to your deployments. If you've got a weak pilot chute and you do manage to slow down too much, or it's just worn out, a lot of factors, we're just trying to minimize risk. So I generally replace mine fairly frequently. I'll just put it up to my mouth and suck and blow air. And if I can do it easily, I'll replace the pilot chute straight away. And generally, when I think about if I need to change it, it definitely already needs changing. So this is another big thing, this next point that I'll make. The weight and shape of your handle can contribute to PC instability. So light handles on your pilot chute, not hackies, are required for wingsuiting, I believe. So you can replace those at the top, but what happened earlier on is the bridle used to beat the hacky out the back when we deployed, and it would cause knotting in the pilot chute. So we'd basically just have a bunch of knots and have to manually extract our pilot chute again. So this is something that unfortunately I had to go over to the States and test as a test dummy. And basically anything to do with this pilot chute here, see the handle is actually made out of carbon fiber. So it was super light, and it always beat your bridle out the back. So that's just something, again, I can't recommend these pilot chutes enough. So if you know someone that wingsuits a bunch, recommend they get it. I definitely recommend they get a Sky Snatch. Definitely recommend. It's almost, I would say, almost mandatory, because it improves the deployment so much. And again, I demo some of these at my drop zone, and they sell themselves just because of the difference that they make. AAD. So this is pretty straightforward, actually. We shouldn't really spend too much time on this, but AADs, important safety tool for us. There are cases where AAs didn't fire during wingsuit instability due to the largeness of the suit. So the person fell slower than their AAD activation speeds. This doesn't really happen these days. It used to, because the suits were getting super big, but they realized big suits don't give the best performance. So suits have gotten significantly smaller in the performance zones, but bigger in the sort of intermediate ranges. So again, wingsuits have high speed, and we do have mid-air collisions. So again, if you don't have an AAD, it's really silly. Again, like contacts with aircraft when you're leaving, that's another big worry for not only pilots, but the wingsuiters themselves. AADs will save you 99.99% of the time. Again, I should notice, or I should tell people with AADs, I turn my AAD on before I put my wingsuit on my rig. This is because I forgot to put my AAD on, because I put my rig on my wingsuit on first, and got down, was packing my chute, and realized my AAD wasn't on. So it's become a rule of thumb for me to turn on my AAD before putting my suits on. Rsl Sky Hooks, I'm just going to tell you right now, I use them. Reason being, I do a lot of performance racing, and handles can get sucked into your suit. It just happens. You can't always control that. Always double check before you're leaving your aircraft if your handles are in or out. But this is completely up to you. But I would always recommend to have a Sky Hook or the RSL, because if you can't get to one of the handles and your cutaway handle also activates your reserve, like that's doing two things for you. And trust me, I've never beaten my Sky Hook, not once. I've had 4 chops so far out of my 3 maybe 3,000 skydives, and they were all while I was testing prototype wingsuits, and I did not beat that skyhook once. Again, okay, I'll stop the share there. Okay. Oh, can you guys see me now or not? Yes, no?
Nope. No, I can't see it.
Okay.
We can see Mr. Garcia.
I can see Mr. Garcia, that's for sure. All right, we don't need to see my ugly head anyway. Helmet wise, I do recommend using a certified helmet. I know Cookie makes them these days. A bunch of other manufacturers make them. Yeah, if you get an impact rated helmet, that's going to be even better for wingsuiting. Hands down, just because of collisions and that sort of stuff. I've been knocked out twice wingsuiting, and I'm glad that we have these helmets now. So hopefully that will reduce that sort of happening. So again, your audible altimeter, again, they're pretty much required, but a slow fall rate can cause a loss of altitude awareness. So what I do is I set mine to 9,000 feet. This is my audible. I set one for 9,000 feet, sort of midway through the skydive. So as soon as that goes off, I check out where I am, where everyone is, where everyone is on the skydive, where we are in relation to where we need to deploy. And it's a super good alarm. So if you're interested in how I set things up, this is how I do it. I also set an alarm for 5,000 feet because generally speaking, when I'm with other people, that is sort of when we're breaking off. And 2,000 feet, obviously, that's my EPs, that's my hard deck. And yeah, activate. Some of these new audibles have a slow fall mode, so that should be activated if you can. So your hand or chest strap mud flap is required too for your visual altimeters. I personally keep a few of these on myself. So if anyone at our DZ is flying around without them, I sort of make it well known that they should always be height aware at all times. Even if that means getting a wrist mounted so you can sort of peek over and it's on your hand. But again, if you've got a wrist mounted altimeter, you're not going to be able to see that when it's zipped around. So, we're running out of time. Sorry, guys. So I thought, well, we might as well talk about wingsuits as well. So this is basically all your different sort of categories of your wingsuit. So you got your tracking. They usually require 0 jumps. So you jump these for your first time with a coach. Down below that, we have the beginners and intermediates. And again, they're pretty low jump numbers, the first few. So the Swift, which I sort of did my first flight course in, is sort of a mid sort of size suit these days. There are smaller. But you can see the ATC3 at the end there, that's quite a big suit for an intermediate. So generally speaking, a lot of people will only get to the ATC and stop there. You can basically do anything you can in a freak, just a little bit less power, just a little bit less range. It is one of the most fun suits to fly. I call it a little go-kart of the sky, because you can do your flares, you can do all your freestyle, you can do all your dynamic flying, you can learn anything you can do in these bigger fun suits, you can do in this ATC3. So even if everyone on the DZ only gets to this stage in their skydiving career, they're going to have the most fun you possibly can have, because after this ATC3, you get into the freak series, and that's when stuff starts to get serious. Like deployments, flying starts to get actually scary. And yeah, so again, stick to a progression plan or path. Don't try to skip ahead thinking everyone's having more fun than you. Because that's the slowest way to learn. If you upsize your wingsuit too fast, you're not going to have the skills to fly that wingsuit when things go south. because these days they're built to fly basically on every angle possible. So if you're flipping out of control, your suit's going to give you 110% power because it's not going to know that you don't want to do that. These new suits that, yeah, it's basically if you're going out of control, if you're head down going out of control, these suits are made to fly head down these days, and it's going to give you everything it's got. So again, the ACC3 is sort of, man, if drop zones just got to that suit and stopped, like that would be super cool. Below those are the serious suits, your Freak 4s, your Klugos, your Corvids, your Sea Race, your CR Plus, and the big Aura 4, which I don't even want to fly. And yeah, so again, to the left, you'll see paths of progression. And that's sort of, if you want to do freestyle, that's a pretty good path to think about. If you want performance, that's sort of the suit categories you want to go to, your base and your formations. And man, I kind of got through it all. I didn't think I would because of that whole sound issue. Awesome. Yeah, does anyone have any questions or anything they want me to talk about? Did I miss something that they might want to know?
Hey, Luke, can I just ask, when
Yes,
you're doing first flight courses with
Yep.
people, what are sort of the general mistakes or just general newbie type things that people need to be aware of that happen more often than not?
Okay, so the biggest thing is exits. People don't know that you shouldn't jump up and out of the plane. You should be jumping. You should be basically side. It's like a side slide out of the plane and entering the relative wind as if you're going to fly. Like you want your head to be hitting the relative wind. You don't want your chest to be hitting the relative wind. A lot of people go chest high, and that's the biggest mistake you can make. And once you get to the biggest sort of wingsuits, that can become a massive issue. So basically the biggest thing is just not relaxing and your exits. Because I mean, they got these suits on that obviously they're going to be nervous. So that is a big issue. But again, you want to enter the relative wind. The way I say is, think about this. When you're jumping in a wave with like a bodyboard or something, you're not going to be 90 degrees to the wave. You're going to try to get that bodyboard as low as possible. So you're going to skim along the top of that water, right? You don't want to get hit by that wave. And that's sort of the same approach that you want with a wingsuit exit. I guess that's the actual biggest issue. And not breathing. Man, I can't count the amount of people that hold their breath when they wingsuit. If they just stop and breathe for a bit and just relax, man, you fly so much better. So that's sort of something that I would suggest and talk about if I was to do the first flight course with someone, is just that whole relaxing. We've got plenty of time. We've got plenty of time to exit. There's no reason to rush out that door. You know, we've got the whole skydive ahead of us. And rushing your deployment is another thing. Just, it's way better to be slower, more predictable, more stable, and still flying your deployment until you're flying a canopy. That is a big tip. If you deploy your parachute and stop flying your body, you're going to have line twists, almost guaranteed. You've got to keep flying your body. It's like when people deploy in any other skydive, they deploy their PC, deploy their parachute, but they're still flying their body until they're flying a canopy. So that's sort of the advice that I would give. Sorry, you let me talk and this is what happens. I can't stop talking. Anybody else? Anybody have any questions? Anything I miss?
Maybe. I was about 20 minutes late to the conversation.
Yep.
What's your take on canopies and wing loading?
Awesome. So obviously, I would say to look at the manufacturer's guidelines. Generally, it's 1.2 to 1 or to 1.3 to 1 for the wing loading. I would recommend getting a wingsuit specific canopy if all you're doing is wingsuiting. So your Squirrel Epicene Pro, your Aerodyne Pilot 7, and your Icarus Kraken, your PD Horizon. The Epicene Pro is going to be your best opening, most predictable canopy you can fly. So when I was testing this, they told me to do barrel rolls while deploying. I still had on heading deployings in at least half of those. And when I tried them on my other canopy that I was using, I had a few issues. So the Epicene is dead set one of the most solid canopies. And the reason being, it's almost like a little base canopy. It's made out of F111, super lightweight, super predictable 7-cell opening. So
Yeah, sick. All right. Well, I didn't go with the Epicene just because it wouldn't fit in my container and I couldn't afford a new container. But
Yep.
I went with the Atar Winks.
Ah, yes, the Winks. The only one that
Yeah,
I
the
haven't
Winks.
actually flown. I've heard good things actually, but I've flown the Epicene, I've flown the Aerodyne, I've flown the Icarus, and I've flown the PD, but I haven't flown the Winks.
Yes. Oh, sweet. Well, I've only had 4 jumps on it so far, just doing normal skydives, and it's
Yep.
it's absolutely been a pisser. So
When you deploy, does it feel a bit harsh when you deploy, or does it feel like very subtle?
It is slightly harsh.
Yep.
I think it's just because it's new and it's a non. What do you call it? It's very slippery, so I can't pack it as good as probably it can be packed. But
Yep.
yeah, I reckon it's honestly, compared to what I've had before with the Saber 2s and all that sort of thing, doing normal skydives, it's just it's beautiful.
Honestly,
So I really love it.
Look, sorry, we have to wrap this up. Unfortunately, we only have 4 minutes. Then we starting the next presentation.
All right. Yeah, but anyway, I'll quickly wrap it up. But the wingsuit canopies these days, you can't really go wrong with any manufacturer. But yeah, they're built for it, mate. So yeah, enjoy it. But if you have any other questions, please hit me up on my Instagram. That's where you'll mostly find me. And yeah, I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Thank you very much, Luke. Very informative. And everyone, we'll see you again in about 3 or 4 minutes for the next presentation. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you very much. Thank you.